Good evening, all. Thank you for joining me, Dorothy, on Through an Orthodox Christian Lens. I've got a lot to talk about that's been going on in the Middle East. It's September 21st, 2025, in the evening here. Let me just get started because there's much to cover over the past week or so. I've had to gather all of these articles because there's just, the Middle East is just like, continues to just boil and bubble up. So we'll see. Total communication blackout in Gaza City as Israeli tanks push in. This is back on September 18th. Israeli troops continue to demolish homes and buildings in Gaza City to make way for a real estate bonanza in the Strip. And that is some huge, how catastrophic can you get? Internet and phone lines were cut in Gaza City as tanks continue to push toward the city center, suggesting an escalation of Israel's ground campaign in the enclave's capital. In the enclave's capital is imminent, the report said. The disconnection of internet and phone services is a bad omen. It has always been a bad signal that something very brutal is going to happen, said a Gaza City resident, Ismail, speaking with the Saudi-owned paper. Ismail was using an eSIM to connect his phone, which is dangerous because it requires seeking higher ground in areas exposed to possible Israeli strikes to receive a signal. The situation around me is very desperate. People in tents and in houses are very worried for their lives. Many can't afford to leave, but many do not want to, he said. The Palestinian telecommunications company issued a statement saying its services had been cut off due to the ongoing aggression and the targeting of the main network routes. Israel regularly cuts the internet and electricity ahead of major military operations. Hundreds of thousands of Palestinians have fled Gaza City since Israel announced it would launch an offensive to occupy it. Palestinians in Gaza City face the difficult choice of staying in their homes amid Israeli bombing or fleeing to a so-called humanitarian zone in the southern territory where there is insufficient food, medicine, and shelter for the displaced. So either way, they're in a bad position, like between a rock and a hard place. That's just terrible. Even if we want to leave Gaza City, is there any guarantee we would be able to come back? Will the war ever end? That's why I prefer to die here in Sabra, my neighborhood, Ahmed, a school teacher, said on the phone. On 16 September, Israeli Defense Minister Israel Katz vowed to destroy Gaza City if Hamas did not release the remaining Israelis it holds captive in the Strip. Okay, so I may have said this before, but the reason why there's hostages, why Hamas has hostages, is because it's bargaining chips. As long as they hold them, that's what I understood as to why they did that in the first place, was because they thought that Israel would come to their senses and do something and make a deal, a reasonable deal with Hamas, that they would actually maybe not. That's what I was listening to. But as you can see, Hamas's strategy, I don't think it it semi-worked at the beginning because they were exchanging hostages from both sides, but I don't think it's doing any much good now. Anyway, that's what it started as, and I don't know, I think it's not going well at this point, that strategy. Okay. They will pay the price and Gaza will be destroyed, and that's not the reason why Israel is doing this either. They don't care about, the Israeli government does not care about the Israeli hostages. Okay, I'm just being straight here. What they care about is taking over the Strip for their Greater Israel or ISI project. Okay, so however, Israeli troops have focused their efforts on demolishing homes and residential high-rise buildings rather than on fighting Hamas. Israeli leaders and business persons have called for reestablishing J settlements in Gaza and launching and constructing an AI-driven smart city and resort destination in the enclave once the majority of Palestinians have been expelled. Israeli Finance Minister Bezalel Smotrich said on Wednesday that the Gaza Strip represents a real estate bonanza. That's disgusting. Over the graves of the murdered victims, Palestinian victims. Speaking at an urban renewal conference in Tel Aviv, Smotrich said there was a business plan for Gaza on U.S. President Donald Trump's table. So, we all know what's going on with that. It's continuous horrible stuff. Now, that was on the 18th. I'm going to give you some more information where, so Israel's tactic is tried and tested before or after it has attacked, maimed, or killed anyone it wants to take out. It calls them Hamas. As these lines are written, Izzy is deploying the same smear campaign again toward the global Sumud flotilla, the magnificent people, including doctors, lawyers, journalists, students, workers, and parliamentarians, who are sailing toward the blood-soaked Gaza coast to break Israel's siege of a devastated land on which its genocide of 2 million Palestinians is proceeding at a mechanical, ruthless, calculated pace. And here's the headline of this. Israel is trying to smear the Gaza aid flotilla as terrorists. We must not let it sound the alarm. Terrorists. Projection, anybody? Projection? Oh my gosh. So now people who are trying to bring food and water and baby supplies are now considered terrorists, okay? Unsurprisingly, as dozens of boats converged from all over the Mediterranean on a common course toward Gaza, the Israeli propaganda machine began to scream Hamas at the top of its lungs, plastering in red the words Hamas flotilla. Oh, God. On photographs depicting its boats. This is not humanitarian. This is a jihadist initiative serving the terror group's agenda. Screeched Israel's foreign minister, but that's not all. If you Googled the words Global Sumud Flotilla on Saturday, the search results you got could have been written by the Izzy propaganda machine. They include sponsored websites with titles such as The Flotilla's Real Goals, How Are Humanitarian Campaigns Exploited, Unmasking the Sumud Flotilla, and Are Humanitarian Flotillas Just Propaganda? Read the facts. Anyone who reads further in search of the promised facts is exposed to the clincher smear. Hamas is behind the flotilla. What we have here now is an active smear campaign which is unfolding in preparation for a strike at the brave people sailing toward Gaza to save our souls, to proclaim loudly and clearly, not in our name, on behalf of you and me. These people, our people, are about to be attacked, abducted, imprisoned, or worse. Their smearing is the first act in a fresh Izzy war crime. This is not the time for analysis, but for action. This is the time to sound the alarm bells, to do whatever it takes to increase Izzy's discursive and propaganda losses from taking out the brave women and men of the global Sumud flotilla. So, this really isn't too much of a surprise to me. I don't know if it is to you all, but that was an opinion piece. And we shall see what happens, but I'm sure they're going to be met with drone attacks and interceptions, or, as it always happens, the IDF shows up and in the international waters where they are just outside of the Gaza area, and arrest them, throw them in jail, do whatever. As I said here, it could be worse, and that's not good. In the meantime, Italian port. This is on 19th of September. Italian port blocks explosive shipments bound for Israel. This is the second time they've done this, that they've tried to stop this, and apparently they did this time. An increasing number of European port workers are refusing to handle shipments tied to ISIS genocide in Gaza. Authorities at the Italian port of Ravenna refused on 18 September to load 2 containers filled with explosives bound for ISIS, following a request from local officials. Ravenna's mayor, Alessandro Baratoni, confirming the intervention in a statement. He said, "Thanks to courageous dockers, we were informed last night of the scheduled arrival today of 2 containers to the Ravenna port. The municipality explained that the port is jointly owned by Ravenna, the provincial authorities, and the Emilia-Romagna regional government, which enabled them to block the shipment." Regional leaders of the Emilia-Romagna government, a major region in northern Italy, formally cut ties with the ISIS government in June, following their earlier decision by the southern coastal region of Puglia. "You must choose a side, and Emilia-Romagna and Ravenna know perfectly which," the leader said in a statement. "The one of innocent victims and hostages, and not the one of criminal governments and terrorist organizations." Italian media reports that port workers and unions are preparing further protests, including planned blockades at Genoa and Livorno in the country's northwestern coast, reflecting a growing wave of opposition throughout Italy. So, interesting piece. So they're still doing their thing there in Italy. Now what we're going to do is go into this one article here. It's not enough to recognize ISIS genocide in Gaza. If nothing is done, we all deserve to live in a world where genocide is the norm. Those with eyes to see and ears to hear, including this author as it happens, have known it for a very long time already. Yet the findings of the United Nations Independent International Commission of Inquiry on the occupied Palestinian territory, including East Jerusalem and Israel, that hereafter the UN Commission, that have just been published and detailed in a long report, are still of great importance. ISIS has been committing genocide against the Palestinians. To any unbiased, intellectually honest, and morally normal reader, no matter his or her politics, the report, the product of 2 years of painstaking fact-gathering and legal analysis, leaves no doubt that ISIS actions in Gaza have matched four of the 5 ways of committing genocide listed in the yeah, we already know all that. Let's see. The UN Commission report, of course, converges with what AP has called a rising chorus of belated yet direly needed acknowledgments of the single greatest crime yet committed in our century, including from the International Association of Genocide Scholars, the world's leading such association, according to the BBC, the ISIS NGOs B'Tselem and Physicians for Human Rights, ISIS, and now even U.S. Senator Bernie Sanders, who used to struggle tooth and nail to unforgivably deny this genocide as long as he could. More generally, by now, 43% even of the Americans see that ISIS is committing genocide and are ready to say so when asked by pollsters. 53% simply don't like ISIS. Both figures are nothing short of sensational in the U.S. context, especially if you consider that it is the young who have had enough of Zionism. Moreover, traditionally staunchly pro-ISIS come what may constituencies are cracking. The right and MAGA are in particular now feature leaders and influencers openly critical of Izzy, such as Marjorie Taylor Greene and Tucker Carlson. Even American evangelicals are rapidly deserting the Zionist color. The Economist has just acknowledged the collapse with dread under the headline, "How Izzy is Losing America." There is nothing to discuss about facts. Water is wet, blood is red, and Izzy is committing genocide. Whoever is still denying this crime or trying to smear those reporting it as Hamas proxies and anti-Semites, as Izzy is, as expected, is only delivering more evidence of their limitless dishonesty. As Chris Sidoti, member of the UN Commission, noted at the press conference presenting its report, no one takes such Izzy propaganda seriously anymore. At least no one with a working brain and a decent conscience. The questions that matter are different. They will shape the common or not so much human future. It is horrible to have to state it. But even if it is not yet history, the Gaza genocide has already happened. If it were stopped today, it will not. Humanity has long missed its chance to prevent it. For that, the Israeli perpetrators, who have never made a secret out of their crime, would have had to be confronted with force at the very latest in November 2023. Now, many future Palestinian victims could still be saved and probably won't. But the genocide is a fact we cannot reverse. What is still at stake, apart from many more lives, is whether we will let this crime become a new normal, a Gaza method, which is the de facto aim of Izzy, the US, and the EU. Our world is terrible as it is and getting worse by the day, but some of us at least still know that war and genocide are not and must not be the same thing. If the promoters of the Gaza method prevail, then war will be genocide, especially when waged by the West and its monstrous creation, Izzy. Let's focus on 4 questions that will matter. First, what are or should be the consequences of Izzy genocide? Second, what about the many in governments, media, and the public sphere who, most of all, but not only in the West, who are complicit in this crime or even so deeply involved that they are really co-perpetrators? And what about the larger group of those, again, states, organizations, businesses, academia, think tanks, you name it, who have done nothing? And finally, last but by no means least, what about the victims and those who have been resisting, including by armed struggle on their behalf? Regarding consequences, it is easy to understand what must happen as a minimum. The surviving victims must finally be protected, the perpetrators brought to justice, in particular now, as Izzy is launching its final assault on Gaza City itself, an attempt at a final solution by even more murder and the full ethnic cleansing of Gaza. That protection could still make a difference. As international law expert Craig something or other has pointed out, the UN General Assembly could use the Uniting for Peace procedure to bypass the American veto in the Security Council and mandate an international protection force for Gaza. Of course, Israel, supported by the U.S. and other genocide co-perpetrating states, such as the UK and Germany, would resist such an intervention. That is no reason not to take the necessary first steps, but it is a reason to be realistic. Ultimately, saving what is left of Gaza and its people will take a more robust approach. Izzy is an extremely criminal state under an entirely insane regime. Like NAZI Germany, it will have to be defeated militarily by a proactive coalition waging a determined war. That I've already said that several times in the past few months. Militarily is the only way that we're going to be able to defeat Izzy's in this genocide. Oh, Lord. Anyway, he goes on. It's a pretty long article. I'm going to get in the whole thing, but he's basically talking about well, the first step, of course, recognize Palestine, obviously must be recognized. We already know about that. What we really need to talk about is de-recognizing ISI. Whatever it is not an ordinary state, and other states need to stop pretending it is. I agree. And so they go on, and they talk about, at the very least, isolate ISI. I think that even Netanyahu said that he recognizes that that his own country is becoming isolated. I saw that a week or so. So in the West, it is time to build some systematic registers of those who need to be charged with complicity, to include thousands of government representatives, bureaucrats at central and local levels, for instance in Berlin, as well as academic, think tank, media, and social media figures who have supported the genocide by broadcasting, sharing, and amplifying ISIS genocidal propaganda. From the mass rape hoax to silencing the fact that many of the victims of 7 October 2023 were killed by the Palestinian resistance, but they were not killed by the Palestinian resistance, but by ISI forces carrying out a Hannibal operation against their own. So, yeah, there was that Rwanda genocide years back. I remember that. Finally, amends will have to be made. How can a Hamas leader, for instance, be vilified as a terrorist if in reality he has desperately and against the odds struggled to stop ISIS genocidal forces? This is perverse. In general, the Palestinians have a right under international law to armed resistance. Resisting genocide makes this only even more obvious. Those who have resisted in the rest of the world, whether by demonstrations, campus, blah, 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 blah. They must have justice. It's basically going on about that. So much more will need to happen if a world that is already post-Gaza genocide wants to reverse a steady descent into hell. It will take decades at least to clean up the filth produced by the crime itself and the widespread complicity. There is no guarantee at all that as a collective we will even try, but one thing is certain: if we don't, we will deserve everything that is coming for us in a world where we all have made genocide the norm or allowed this to happen. And of course, World War III and the comments from the saints and elders about what happens to ISI, well, there it is. On that issue. Now to move on from the Gaza issue, we're going to go into a more recent thing that was happening, and I'm going to bring that up. I'm going to share this video, this portion that Mahmood had said yesterday. So let's go from here on. ISI and Egypt.
The Israelis are showing concern from the recent developments that are happening in the Mediterranean with the declaration of Egypt and Turkey that they're going to be conducting a joint drill in the Mediterranean simultaneously with the arrival of the 8th flotilla for Gaza that we spoke about yesterday. But it did not end there. Israel today is actually threatening and warning and saying that Egypt is responsible for these drones passing to Israel, to Gaza, and also the attacks that are being carried out from Yemen against Israel. What are they worried about, and what's leading Benjamin Netanyahu, which I will get to in a second, to ask the United States, demand that the United States applies pressure on Egypt to stop what they're doing inside of the Sinai Peninsula, because they are considering it, according to a source that spoke with the Israeli channel 12 today, very serious. What's happening in Sinai is very serious and exceptionally dangerous for Israel. The Ansarullah in Yemen, who are conducting attacks against Israel regularly, send drones and missiles. Some of them pass through the Red Sea, some of them pass over Egypt. Egypt denies that. Some of them go through Jordan, some of them, according to some reports, go and pass over the Mediterranean. Again, a route that will usually go over the Sinai Peninsula at some point, undoubtedly. The Israelis, they started to raise this with the American side, to speak with the Egyptian authorities, because there is no communication, by the way, between the Egyptian authorities and the Israeli authorities at the political level, to say the listen, now everything is minimized almost to a halt completely in terms of any security arrangements inside of the Sinai Peninsula, in accordance with the Camp David Accords and the peace treaty between Egypt and Israel. Egypt, they asked it to stop or try and take down some of these drones that are coming from Yemen. Egypt refused. They said, we were not going to participate in anything. When the war with Iran began as well, Jordan agreed to intercept, if you recall, and they did intercept some of the Iranian missiles. They asked Egypt again, if anything passes through Egypt, please take it down. Egypt again said no. But these drones that they're speaking about here are more than just the attacks that are being conducted from Yemen. They are also in relation to smuggling to the Gaza Strip, and also smuggling inside of occupied Palestine, so inside of Israeli territories. And from an Israeli perspective, this could be very dangerous. Why? Because it can include things that are against Israel's national security, as they claim. So what is this doing exactly? This is leading the Israelis to ask the American authorities to apply pressure on the American side. More reports today that Benjamin Netanyahu is asking the American side to speak with the Egyptians, telling them, stop what you're doing in Sinai and reduce the forces. The Axios website reported today that during the Prime Minister's meeting with Marco Rubio on Monday, a list of activities in Sinai that he claims constitute a material violation by Egypt of the 1979 peace treaty with Israel was presented. An Egyptian official rejected the claim and said that the Trump administration did not raise the issue with Cairo. Now, what is Benjamin Netanyahu trying to get out of this? Netanyahu has been openly criticizing Egypt for the past several months.
Okay, so he's going to go on that, and I'll show you a quick little video through Hindustan Times. Yeah, some people are like, why are you using that? Well, it's a quick way to show what's going on. And after all, we just heard what Mahmoud said, so let's just go through on this one really quick. So Gaza displacement could turn Sinai into war zone. Egypt on alert. That was 7 hours ago they put this out. Egyptian MP issues chilling warning amid regional tensions. Tel Aviv in danger. Egypt signals strong response to Israeli strikes. So Israel had struck. Cairo slams Israel, vows action if borders violated. This as Egypt's new missile power sends shockwaves through Israel. China's weapons in Sinai. Egypt deploys HQ-9B to deter Israel, or deter. Egyptian lawmaker Mustafa Bekri warned Israel of retaliation if borders were infringed. The threat follows Israeli airstrikes on Hamas leadership in Doha, Qatar on September 9th. Cairo also reacted to Arab media claims of expected mass Palestinian displacement into the Sinai. Turkey threatened action. Find us the next day in Tel Aviv. You have been warned. Egypt's Mustafa Bakri threatens Israel. Beware of this language. You will not cross our borders and you will not kill on our soil. Egypt cannot be invaded. Egypt is strong and healthy. And if you cross the country's borders for any reason, you will find us the next day in Tel Aviv. You have been warned. Cairo's fumes amid growing Gaza crisis. Egypt tightened security around Palestinian officials after Hamas assassination attempt in Doha. As of mid-2025, the Egyptian armed forces include around 440,000 active personnel. Remember, Egypt has deployed approximately 40,000 troops to the northern Sinai Peninsula. Egyptian forces on border with Gaza and Israel put on full alert, military preparations underway. Lebanese paper Al Akbar reported Egypt prepared to deploy heavy troops, equipment if necessary. Egyptian military instructed to keep humanitarian standards at border, not to fire on Palestinians. Reports say Israel assumed full responsibility for stopping Gazans at Rafah crossing. Egypt prepares for showdown. Cairo called Israeli drone weapon smuggling claims illogical due to security coordination. President Abdel al-Sisi warned at Arab Summit that Gaza capture threatens peace with Israel. Egypt ready to double troops and send aircraft to Sinai within 72 hours if mass displacement occurs. Egypt insists it won't suspend security agreements with Israel despite border tensions. I think that's not what Mahmoud said. Egypt accuses Israel of attempted demographic engineering, pushing Gazans into Sinai. The U.S. and Israel seek to limit Egypt's role in negotiations amid displacement crisis. Yeah, I think he was even talking about that too. So, we got that update. So far, hopefully you're still with me with all this. So far, we have the whole thing with the Gaza issue, the Gaza City issue, that the Izzies are destroying the buildings in Gaza, all kinds of buildings. There's the blackout issue, loss of internet, loss of electricity in that area. They've been moved to the south, which is, like, again, dangerous. You can't win for the Palestinians in this. Then you have the blocking of the ports of supplies to Izzi that the Italians are doing at this port. And then we talked about ways that we could do something about this regarding Gaza, which seems practically impossible these days anymore. But then we got into the whole thing with Egypt and Izzi. Izzi has like a 7-pronged war going on. The 7 countries it's bombing. It's ridiculous. Okay, and so we are up to that point. Now we still have to go into a couple more areas because we've talked about Egypt, we've talked about Izzi, we've talked about Gaza, but there's one other place that we need to discuss, and that is Syria. New Syrian army begins training in Turkey, or Turkey, I guess you say it as. Hundreds of Syrian forces are already in training with plans to expand the program as Ankara withdraws from Aleppo. This was out September 9th. Turkey has begun training Syrian forces under a security agreement signed between Ankara and Damascus in August. Several sources familiar with it, that's from the Middle East Eye. One source said around 300 Syrians, mostly soldiers, but also some police officers, are undergoing training at 2 bases in central and eastern Turkey. A second source added that Ankara intends to train about 5,000 Syrian soldiers and policemen in the short term, with the number expected to rise to at least 20,000 over the medium to long term. At the same time, Turkish security forces have started withdrawing from northern Aleppo, where they were deployed for 8 years as part of the Syria Emergency Task Force. Bases in Azaz and Jarablus have already been evacuated and handed over to security forces affiliated with the new Syrian administration. Equipment and personnel pulled back from Aleppo are being transferred to Turkey's Hatay, and I can't pronounce the other place, and Kilis provinces, with some temporarily redeployed inside Turkey. A Syrian government spokesperson said they were not aware of the training program, while the Turkish Defense Ministry has not commented, although it confirmed last month that the bilateral agreement would provide Damascus with training, consultancy, and equipment procurement. The deal is viewed as the first step toward restructuring Syria's armed forces, transferring expertise and supplying equipment to build a modern military capable of responding to internal and external threats. Damascus had formally requested Turkish military assistance in July after Israeli airstrikes targeted Damascus and Suada. Okay, so let's go back to let's see. Syrian media reported that Israeli aircraft struck targets in Latakia, I guess, and Homs on Monday night, hitting an air defense school and ammunition depots. An Israeli security source told this news agency the strikes targeted warehouses holding Turkish-made missiles and defense systems. That sounds like they're trying to get rid of Turkey's weapons, of course. Turkey is trying to harass us and drag us into a military competition that we do not fear but do not want, the source said, insisting Izzy would strike any perceived threat and demanding the demilitarization of southern Syria. Good Lord. The largest developments come as Ankara pressures the Kurdish-led Syrian Democratic Forces to integrate into the new Syrian security forces. Okay, so I'm going to give you the next thing that's having to do with Turkey and Izzy, and that is this, a very important one. Is Turkey Israel's next target in the Middle East? Following Israel's Doha strikes, Ankara is increasingly on high alert over Tel Aviv's regional ambitions. So this was on the 21st, today. So at Istanbul, Turkey, just hours after Israel launched strikes last week against Qatar, a United States designated major non-NATO ally and one of Washington's closest Gulf partners, pro-Israel commentators quickly shifted their attention to Turkey. In Washington, Michael Rubin, a senior fellow at the right-leaning American Enterprise Institute, suggested that Turkey could be Israel's next target and warned that it should not rely on its NATO membership for protection. Isn't that interesting? You see, they want these people to be in NATO, and then if you're in the NATO, you're supposed to support. If you're in the NATO group, you're supposed to support the other NATO nations and help them. But apparently, we're like, no, we're not going to do that for Turkey. Okay. On social media, Israeli academic and political figure Mir Masri posted, "Today Qatar, tomorrow Turkey." Oh, wonderful. Ankara responded sharply in unusually harsh language. A senior advisor to President Erdogan wrote, "To the dog of Zionist Izzy, soon the world will find peace with your erasure from the map." Wow. For months, pro-Izzy media outlets have steadily escalated their rhetoric against Turkey, portraying it as Izzy's most dangerous enemy. Okay. This stuff is really important. Israeli Izzy commentators have also framed Turkey's presence in the Eastern Mediterranean as a threat and its role in rebuilding post-war Syria as a new rising danger, as Izzy's regional aggression is escalating and its war on Gaza showing no sign of ending. Turkish Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan retaliated in August by suspending economic and trade ties with Israel. Yes, I remember that. In Ankara, this anti-Turkish rhetoric is taken seriously, with Izzy seen as seeking regional hegemony. Yes, that's true. And this Omer something or other non-resident fellow at the Atlantic Council told Al Jazeera, Turkey increasingly feels that Izzy aggression has no limits and enjoys American support. Well, that's true. So, well, there we go. Why is this important? If you all have been following my channel and you've all been following this story about this conflict that's going to heat up, this is going to turn into a real heated conflict, according to the Metropolitan, and I will bring that up now just as a reminder. Right now, Erdogan is considered one of the world's great leaders. President of the United States even said about him, he's a smart guy. This is back in December 2024. So, of course, this is when Biden was still in. That's what he called him, smart guy. And I've showed you this many times. What can we do? This is how things are in our times. Whoever holds military power prevails. As we know, this part, I'm just reiterating. He also commented that Erdogan succeeded without much bloodshed in taking Syria. Yes. Essentially, he legitimized him, as we know, as I said. I would use another term in modern Greek, he emboldened him and even praised him, the U.S. president, talking about to Erdogan. Or Erdogan. He did this deliberately to provoke Erdogan into starting a war with the Kurds now. Still see, I'm not sure what's going on with the Kurds, but we shall see. The Israelis are looking for allies. They feel that their main allies in the Mediterranean region are the Greeks. Both in Greece and Cyprus. And in the east, it will be the so-called Kurdish state. Remember, the Kurds are a people of 40 million. The U.S. is promoting them. And eventually, there will be a clash between the Israelis and Turkey. That's pretty obvious, because they both want that area. They're not going to give it up. Erdogan wants his Ottoman Empire, and Netanyahu wants his Greater Israel Empire. My gosh. Okay, so I just wanted to share all that with you. I know it took me 5 million years to get through all this, but it's just there was so much Middle East news, although you don't usually see too much of it in the West, but there was so much I was following, and I was like, I just have to make time to actually give you an update on this. It's just nonstop with all these reports. I also want to apologize for the sound of this blower thing, because our crawl space needed to be cleaned out. There were some accidents of pipes and everything, and so they had to clean up things and sewage and all that. It was just terrible, and it wasn't cheap either. And so they have these huge air cleaning machines that they put down in the crawl space and put down in our living room, and so it sounds like this blowing air tunnel, almost like a tornado in the house. Anyway, if you hear that, so sorry. Okay, I think I've gone on long enough. Thanks so much for watching. Thanks so much for following my channel. If any of this information is interesting, or you feel that you want to share it, go ahead and share it. Like it if you like it. Sorry for babbling so much. I hope you got something out of this. I really do. Anyway, have a blessed evening. Until next time.